Alright, this is discussion post number 6.
I'm Lauren.
I'm Riley. Sarah.
And Alicia.
Sarah Nondorf, to be specific. I'm going to turn this fan off so it's not quite so loud.
AKA Lucy.
AKA so many names.
Alright, so where do we want to start, guys?
Do you want to start with mindsets, or do you want to start talking about No Child Left Behind?
Let's end with No Child Left Behind, because that's a sensitive subject.
I love that.
Okay.
Let's talk about, so remember in the first chapter it was the mindsets of,
And Aria.
Of teachers.
of teachers, and why. So how do mindsets influence, our ideas about our own teaching? What did you think when you read that, or, how does it make you think differently, etc.?
I guess, mindset. I guess kind of in what I read from that is having past experiences influences how we're going to teach, and basically how our outlook on teaching is kind of based on that. So I guess some of our good experiences from being taught well are, okay, I'd like to teach like this, and this works well, it keeps students engaged. And then the same thing for our bad experiences. If a teacher, belittled you, or, made you feel like crap in front of, your classmates.
My entire class, like that one.
You don't want to be the teacher that does that. But I guess the hard part about what chapter 1 said was that honestly we teach based on how we got taught.
Yeah.
Which is like, whoa, hope I don't teach bad, because
and there's that
definitely
whole, it can become a vicious cycle, because if you were taught poorly and then you go into teaching, then you're going to only go by how you were taught because that's what you know.
Mm-hmm.
Versus in the less likely scenario of you being like, oh heck no, I'm never going to be like that person, and being the complete opposite. Like in Matilda, Mrs. Trunchbull versus Miss Honey, how they were like complete polar opposites. That whole thing. I love Matilda. It's such a good movie. / book / musical. It's a triple threat.
Yeah. Well, I think past experience, especially past educational experiences, you always draw upon them when you're thinking about lesson plans or thinking about school in general. While they are, positive and can help you kind of form a craft and be a good teacher, I think, like you said, they're also very limiting, especially as times are changing. We're teaching math completely differently.
Oh my gosh.
I learned it, and it's had I walked into a classroom right now and taught math the way I learned math,
no one would know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, my students would miss out on a lot of new opportunities that people have come up with that I think are
I
great.
actually, in our math class recently, I think I stated, it was either this week or last week, where I was like, I wish that I was taught math the way I'm currently learning to teach it, because I think I might have actually succeeded in that subject, or, a lot of my setback was because of in my post was a terrible teacher that I had that both of you know about. I think you know about that as well, and so, that instantly made me, okay, the teacher just said I'm stupid, so I must be stupid. Why even put any effort forth anymore at this point, kind of a deal. So that, not only affected me that year as a 6th grader, but that affected me throughout my academic career in grade school through high school, but then also continuing on into college, and even now as a returning adult learner. It's affecting me. I have severe test anxiety, and even hearing the word math and that I have to take math classes, I'm like, so that will affect your students for the rest of their lives. And you don't want to ever be that person.
Yeah.
Why would you want to do that to someone?
Yeah. Well, and then there was the other one that was you're going to teach how you're being taught to teach, which I guess knowing Woodring, and then I have a couple other friends who are in teacher programs, across the nation, and one of my friends, her teacher education program, she is going to be graduating early next year because she got done with it in a year and a half.
Oh wow!
What?
Right, and including student teaching.
How do you do
I
that?
don't think it's possible.
And
Was that at Western, you said?
No.
Oh, I was like,
in
how did she even accomplish that?
And so to me, being able to go through, especially Woodring's program, which is so intensive and culturally rich
Mhm.
and so focused on like social justice and community and building better teachers that I think we are at an advantage in that we will teach how we are taught to teach, which I think is a good thing. I mean, yes, it could be limiting in certain areas or depending on what you need to teach, but I think overall, I think being at Woodring, it makes it.
They try to make sure that it's more well-rounded individuals that they're putting out into the workforce versus here's the curriculum, this is what you need to do. Well, I just figured I'd bring this up. It's it's the figure of three.
Which I definitely agree with. But the part that I saw as, like, being, like, teaching how you taught is you find, I guess, a way that you think or heard or just someone said was a good way, but you just teach it that way, but don't base it off of your students' needs.
Yeah,
even though, like, the technique or method or, you know, that way of doing something may be really great, it might not work for your group of students. So that's why it's like more of your interpretation, and you have to see if that really meets the needs of your students, regardless of it being a good way of doing something.
Right. Well, and like the video has, I think the teacher's name was Maria, the video we had to watch, where she had the rap song for the kids because it was something that was culturally relevant to this large ELL-based classroom that she had, largely, not large. So it was something that they would be interested in, but then they're actually learning about homophones and they're learning about rhythm and rhyme, and there's so much richness in that, and they're not even realizing that they're getting taught those things because they're not sitting down being lectured at. Because really, who learns well being lectured at?
Yeah.
I don't know of any individuals that that is how they learn well, but that is how primarily things are taught, especially more dense or dull subjects are taught in that manner because, well, there's no way to do this fun. Well, maybe just because you haven't put any effort to make it fun. If you can do that. Like, I know I have that stuck in my head.
Yeah, like the the TED Talk in the video was talking about a math teacher, and he compared a physics problem. And so, and you guys, I don't know if you guys have watched it, but pretty much he compares it to a physics problem. And so in the problem, there's 3 variables that you just plug into an equation. And then when you come to the test, it's the same 3 variables. It's like, it's the same, like you have 3 variables, they're just different numbers, and then you plug it into the equation. So pretty much what he was saying is you're not even learning any physics, you're just learning how to read an equation. And so he took it in his math class and he made it more, realistic and like things that students can relate to. Like he had a problem where in a grocery store there's one person with 9 items, but there's 4 people with like 2 items, 1 item, 5 items. Like which line should you go to? Like that sounds like an interesting problem to me, and I hate math, and I feel like just adding on to you, just getting that connection with students just helps so much in their learning and in their education.
Yeah, well, something that I liked in that video that he said, he was like, you could pass a physics test and not have, not have to learn physics. You just have to know how to read a textbook.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I feel like is what a lot, I guess not at the elementary level, but maybe in some schools depending on what they're using to teach, like math and science. But especially in those upper grade levels where they start using textbooks. Like I noticed this in like middle school and high school for me, that teachers would give you the textbook, you were expected to read a chapter, and then they would go verbatim the chapter in class. And to me it's like I wouldn't have even had to learn this information. I would just have to be able to plug in numbers or plug in an equation or memorize a timeline in order to pass the test, and then of course it is completely forgotten out of my head the second the test is over. And it's like that's
the
not
whole
actually
teach
learning.
to the test thing. It's, which we'll get into later.
Yes.
That just that's a whole other.
I definitely think having relevant content really fuels how people learn and listen and understand, and whether they're going to pay attention at all. And I was kind of thinking about that in my math class where we're talking about, I guess, bikes and bike trails, and okay, if you know, if you like go 2/3 of the way, if you've gone 2/3 of like this much of a mile, but that's only 3/4 of the entire race, like how far do you actually gone, or whatever? And it's just like, to me,
But your Veronica got that in like 3 seconds. Right?
I'm not a biker, so I'm like, okay, and we do the same problem talking about bikes and races with like 6 different problems with different fractions, and that's just not interesting.
It's not
We're talking
relevant
about
to
the
you.
same thing, and also we're doing the same exact thing, just with different numbers.
Yeah, see,
So-
to me, it's got to be all about relevancy,
It
especially
really
with
is.
ELLs.
Yeah.
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 Because everything to them is so much harder that if you can make it culturally relevant to them, they're going to understand it and they're going to want to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
Or it'll
It is
just be
so
that whole,
far-fetched
oh, I get this. And then they can actually, they'll focus in a little bit more. It's the same like when we learn another language, you have those aha moments. You're like, oh,
Mhm.
hola
get
means
this.
hello. Oh, I can say hello to you. Kind of like, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a very basic way of saying that. I couldn't think of it.
But it
Sombrero
makes
is
sense.
hat. But like that whole, oh, I recognize that word. Okay, I think I might be able to piece this together now. If you're that new to another language, if you really don't understand it, which a lot of our ELLs don't use English on a regular basis until they get into the school setting.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was like bringing it back to Tucson and you know the class there, the cultural studies, the Hispanic studies classes. It's like those students who probably began as ELLs or you know not necessarily ELLs but are
Second
you know,
generation.
second generation in America. The classes that were not culturally relevant to them, you know, went over their heads. They didn't understand them. They didn't want to understand them. They didn't want to learn
Didn't
them.
They just
relate to
checked
them.
out.
But yeah,
Yeah.
the second the material relates to them, it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Now I want to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about you know just making it so relevant.
It's like Curtis Acosta and his precious knowledge. The whole
Exactly.
thing of, you know, yeah.
Well, and continuing off of that, it can meld into math too. When am I ever going to use this? Why is this
Mhm.
relevant for me to learn? Doing it in more of like a grocery store setting where everyone will eventually have to learn how to buy things and go into a grocery store. And if you only have 15 minutes before you have to be somewhere, so you want to pick the shorter line, you kind of, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I totally scan not only the line to see how long the lines are, but how much crap the people have in front of them.
Exactly.
Because that line could have 6 people in it, but each of them could maybe only have 3 things, versus this line that has only one lady in front of me, but she has like 3 cartfuls.
Yeah.
That one's obviously going to take longer than those people.
Yeah.
And especially at this Fred Meyer. Oh my goodness. I try to avoid Fred Meyer if I can. I try to go to Winco. I know it's farther away, but it's usually not as busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something else with this chart that I wanted to talk about was
Okay.
like the things that are like out of our control. So like okay, I have to look.
Curriculum-based
Sorry.
things.
Yeah, materials, curriculum, and legislation.
Mm-hmm.
So things that aren't really in and
Oh.
students. Sorry.
The students should get. Oh, actually, so I can talk about that one a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
My practicum that I had last quarter, I was at Happy Valley, and the CT that I had, they had a whole bunch of new to the school students come at the beginning of the year because of Larrabee closing. It was Larrabee, right?
Yeah.
Closed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Larrabee closed?
Yeah, Larrabee
Mhm.
closed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I totally forgot.
So because of that, they were getting a whole slew of incoming students all across the district, but I was only at Happy Valley, and so they put in, they put the grades together, tried to make it somewhat an even boy-girl ratio, because that tends to be a little bit easier to have that even, or having more girls and more boys or whatever. And my CT, after a week, after having one full week with her students, realized that they gave her a substantial amount of, she had a couple ELLs, she had 4 or 5 gifted
Talented students.
that have already been, not diagnosed, but already been
Yes.
tested for that, put into the
Yes.
program. Thank you, assess,
Yeah.
that's what I'm looking
Yeah.
for.
Diagnosed.
And then diagnosed children that are in
Sped.
more of a SPED situation, yeah. And she had
Girl.
like 3 of those in that classroom. So it was like, boom, all right, now how do I deal with this? Because she has ones that are like way above and beyond everybody else, and then she has, you know, your average everyday students, and then she had ones that get overwhelmed way too quickly, and you have to like let her just do her thing, kind of a deal. And it was my first day in my practicum, I was like, holy crap, how do you do this? And like, you know, in retrospect, the principal was even like, whoa, we're really sorry we gave you that much of a differentiation, but it's so far into the school year, there's nothing we can do about it at this point. And now they know that later on for their grade 3 that they won't put some of the kids together because they just don't function well together because of their differences, and either being the high functioning versus the
ones that need a little extra support.
Exactly. So that was interesting. I don't know if that touches on what you were trying to talk
it
about.
does, because it's like, you know, all these mindsets that come in, and then, you know, you have, what are these called? Influences, that's the better word. Influences. It's like all these influences coming in, and then, you know, because you can kind of control how you're going to teach, and what you're going to teach, and like,
the way your classroom's set up.
But you can't control what kind of students are coming in. You can't control the funding that your school has.
Or the like programs.
You almost can't even control the curriculum, because in Yvonne's story, she was teaching her students words that would, you know, they could relate to, and the board got mad at her because she was teaching words that aren't in the curriculum. And I don't know if it made her leave, but I think it was one of the factors.
Yeah.
And if you're doing your own pro and con list, that's definitely like at the top of the con list to work on.
When she was in Columbia, she was teaching in a school, and what was it? The school, like the government and the schools required that they teach through the textbook and have exercises through the textbook, and that all the assignments and tests are memory and copy based. So pretty much you just are like, okay, we're all going to read this as the class, and we're all going to go through like the like 3 main points, and so then when you do the test, it's going to be these exact 3 same points, and like that's just how it is. So you can't deviate from that because the school like requires this. Yeah, and it's like, what are you supposed to do if the school is like, you need to use this book and you have to go over these specific points, and they need to be able to pass this specific test.
Yeah. And if they fail, you fail.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so limiting in so many different ways, but it's things that you have to deal with every year that are going to be different. So it's like, it's crazy. How do we deal with those, and like, what steps can we take to, I guess, like, alleviate some of that?
Materials kind of go along the same lines, because, like, for example, when we first got here, well, freshman year, which was, freshman year for me was 3 years ago, and that was when Canvas was just starting to become a thing, and 3rd quarter in, the school made it so that every teacher had to use it regardless. And so teachers weren't, or professors weren't sure how to use it, you know, all the, like, to the best of their ability. So they're like trying to figure it out, and they're like, oh, can someone help me do this? Because they need to use it. And it's like, yes, this is, I guess, a great way to, like, you know, make everything, like, I guess, what is it? Uniform. But if it's taking away from class time, that's when it's an issue. So, like, whether it's giving
it's
people
no longer beneficial at that
point. Whether it's giving people materials they're not sure how to use, or whether you don't have materials to give people an equitable education. Like, you can't control that unless it's like fully out of your pocket, but you don't
teachers have a really crappy salary,
exactly.
So you're not going to have the ability to do it out of pocket.
Exactly. And so it's like, that's kind of out of our control too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Like, if I had the money, you know, it would be that whole, in an ideal world, I would have the money to be able to give all of my students computers. I would have the money to give all of my students the materials that they need, the pencils, pens, the clothes, the manipulatives, whatever they might need. That's just not the case, at least in this country.
School doesn't allow her to have the money, or the, you know. So
if you don't have the funding, then there's nowhere to grab the money from other than from your own pocket, and your teacher, so the likelihood of you being able to pull from your own pocket, unless you're Bill Gates' wife, is not going to happen.
So that definitely influences how you will teach if you don't have certain resources.
You do, however, become very creative in your resources.
Yeah.
For instance, in my art class, my Art 380 class, I have, I can't even remember her last name now, but her name's Gay. She's fantastic if you haven't taken any
her
art
last
classes.
name's Gail or something. Gail Gay.
Gay Green. It's not Gail Green. It's GG though. Like her initials are GG. She's fantastic, and she was saying that because she taught art in school, she was a art on a cart teacher because she didn't have her own classroom.
Okay.
So she would put all the materials that she would need for the day for the classroom on the cart, and the kids would love it because they would hear the cart coming down the hallway knowing it was art day for them, kind of everything. I was like, oh, that's adorable, I love it, because I remember having an art on a cart teacher come into our classroom, and we would be like, okay, is it the TV with Bill Nye coming in, or is the art on the cart lady coming in, because we never quite knew. But she was saying for keeping it cheaper for yourself, because a lot of times you have to do a little bit more out of pocket, especially for art supplies and things of that nature. For watercolors and for acrylics, you can easily use just brown paper bags, and it works just as well as using the paper that they say is the better paper to use. Of course, it's better paper. It's specified for that, but the brown paper bags work just as well. And you can get brown paper bag lunch bags at like Costco or Cost Cutters or something like that for like pennies on the dime, which is just a fantastic idea. Like, there's so many things that you can do that way, or you can have everybody, well, I'm not gonna say everybody, that's way too generic, but most people have access to a toilet and to toilet paper, where there is toilet paper rolls that end up happening, and you just have them collect them and bring them in, so then you have an excess of those. And there's so many crafts and things that you can do with toilet paper rolls, which my brain is going 1,000 miles a minute thinking of all the different ones you can do right now. But because you can do that for science, you could do that for math things that can make it a manipulative for any of those. I think I may have just gone off topic slightly with a tangent, so
that's
I
okay.
apologize.
No, it was
a tangent. It was relevant.
It was good. Teachers are really creative in their resources, and we will be.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, I think the thing that just amazed me with reading both of these chapters is just how much comes into a teacher. So we talked a lot about what goes into a student and what goes into, you know, how they learn.
Yeah.
But it was interesting to see how much goes into an actual teacher.
Yeah.
I always get that feeling just at random times, especially when I'm in SPED class.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you gotta get gifted students and special ed students, but also there's not really any like normal student anymore, and it's just like, oh, there's just stuff. And even if two kids have the same disability, it's not on the same level, and they're different, and it's just. You just have so many things to worry about, and on top, and that's just students.
It's
like,
funny because
normal is almost a no-no word, really, to use.
Yeah.
It's funny because people think being a teacher is an easy thing. Oh, you're just gonna be a teacher. You just have to stand up there and say stuff.
It's that stupid phrase that if you can't teach, I want to punch people
if
when
you
they say it.
can't do anything else, you teach or whatever or something like that.
That's not the case.
Nope.
Because you are either really good at it, so you go to teach. Means you have the passion to,
or you like children,
or you just really like children, you want to do all of it. Can we talk about these teacher attitudes things?
Yeah, sure.
And how much they irked me.
Yeah.
Like the one that says teaching isn't like it used to be. That saying in general, I completely agree with. But then, like, you know, further reading into it, you're like, okay.
I mean, yes, it's true. Like, teaching isn't what it used to be.
Yeah,
Kids don't sit in straight
definitely
desks and you can't hit their hands with a ruler. But I think that's for the better.
Exactly. This one, the language minority kids make me look like a failure. I can see where they're coming from, but it's so biased at the same time.
Yeah.
Where it's like, well, then maybe you should attempt to reach them more.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, we are in the LLC program, so we are already like programmed to feel more empathetic towards those students. But at the same time, it's why wouldn't I know I've said this 1,000 times, but why wouldn't you just make that
I feel like
extra attempt?
Yeah.
That attitude definitely goes alongside with No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
Yes.
And teaching to the test. It's
Yes.
like, I guess we'll get into this later, but like, it's, you know, if your students don't succeed, then you don't succeed, and then you lose your job. And so it's like, that's the tough part.
And the other one that really irked me, they were all kind of, they had their irkedness to them. But the don't expect too much of these students. I read that title and I was like, oh.
Really?
Oh, because that's the same thing that happens with a lot of SPED children, is that you don't expect them to be able to, they're not going to get this. That is so not the attitude you need to have as an instructor.
Especially with ELLs too.
Especially with
For
ELLs,
anyone,
with
you
special
should
ed,
be a
like anyone in
teacher.
general. Yeah, if you are going to be like that, you really shouldn't be teaching at all, because that's a huge part of who we are teaching these days.
Mm-hmm.
They're all about inclusiveness. It's all about incorporating all sorts
Differences,
of people
diversity.
Diversity, exactly.
Ooh.
And, like, I don't know if I know I've spoken to you guys about my nephew, but I don't know if I've said anything about him
I think a little bit.
this. But because he's high functioning autistic, he has high functioning autism. For the longest time, he was misdiagnosed, and they like brushed him off as just the problem child. That he won't be able to learn this. This is too much for him, and I hate that mindset so much. And so I read that, and I instantly was like, oh, my Taylor, because that's exactly what his teachers did. They literally just were like, no, don't want to deal with you. And he's one of the smartest kids I know. You just have to hook him. So it's the same concept for the ELLs. You just have to have that hook that brings them in, that's the culturally relevant, or just any sort of relevancy to their life. Even if it's fishing, like the kid likes to go fishing. Figure out something you can do with fishing. There's a myriad of things that you might be able to figure out to do with fishing alone. Again, tangent, I apologize.
No,
but
you're good.
Okay,
It kind of makes me think of...
It makes us empathetic.
yeah.
It makes me think of when I was in 310 and we talked about having like a safe and caring environment. So if you have that environment, it'll make students want to learn more. So if
they'll feel comfortable to be able to be who they are within that mini culture that you've created, which is like the ideal classroom, is that you've created a comfortable, safe environment for these children to learn from each other and learn from you, and you learn from them, because you totally learn from children every year. Like, you learn something new every year as a teacher.
What was it? It's something else. We were talking about this in SPED as well, about really being there as a teacher, like, and caring for the student is like the best thing you can do, because if they feel like they are a part of something, that makes them want to like learn and try. And so
being present, not being robotic, just spouting what you know, because this is this lesson plan. I planned this, I've done this for 15 years. Yeah.
And every teacher like should just value every student and not make assumptions, which was kind of went into my competence and performance section, which was just because a student didn't perform well doesn't mean that shows exactly how smart they are.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because like, okay, if I'm not good at math, that doesn't mean I'm not good at English or, some other subject.
Or even just because I don't test well in math doesn't mean I'm not good at math.
Yeah.
Because that's my life story.
Yeah, I'm bad.
Literally. What section was that in? Was that in chapter 4 or was that the article?
That was in chapter 3.
Okay.
I think.
Come on.
3. I think
Yeah, when I read them all at once, then I'm like, I don't remember where I got this from, but I know I read it.
I wrote about competence versus like
since 4.
performance as well, because it's like and then it talked a lot. Where was it? I don't remember.
Competence, performance. Communication. Competence. Because then there was also the difference between like communication competence. So like if you speak English, like if you're a native English speaker, you're well at speaking it, but you're not as well grammatically.
Yes.
And the other way around, if you're not a native speaker, you generally get better at it because you have to learn it from scratch. Whereas they're like, oh well, we don't like. In general, they're like, okay, people who they kind of judge your competence off of how grammatically correct your English is verbally.
Yes.
We actually were talking about this
Sorry.
in our 432 today, the linguistically, how people how did I say it? It was one of the other classes that we were listening to, one of the other groups that we were listening to their thing. It was whatever Taylor said. He said something so well of people that, like Ebonics and dialects and people that don't speak grammatically correct, but you understand them. If there's a difference between their intelligence versus their ability to speak it. Their dialect. I'm not quoting him correctly, but the way that he said it, I was just like, yes, exactly. And now, of course, I can't think of what he said. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that and write that down.
Like
but
I mean, it's true. There is no link between intelligence and your grammar.
Or your ability to spell, or...
Yeah, like ELLs, their intelligence does not, change with their ability to speak English, They could be the smartest kid in the world. They maybe just speak Spanish better than English, and that's totally okay. And as long as you're willing to work with that student, you can learn that, you do understand what I'm saying. Maybe you just can't write out your thoughts in English fully.
Yeah.
But you have the correct things going on in your brain, and you know what's going on, and you understand.
You can see that even in toddlers that are born into England, where are we? America. That are born as English speakers, have English speaking parents that are born in the States. As a toddler, they know what you're saying, and they know what you're saying. They just literally and physically cannot verbalize a response or whatever. Because like the little boy Anyani, he is ridiculously smart for his age. He's only 19 months old, and he gets, like, I'll be talking, like, being silly and be like, blah, 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 right? And he will know exactly what I said. I'm like, go pick it up, because he'll throw something. I'm like, where'd it go? And then he will literally go and find it and go pick it up and bring it back to me. Or if I'm asking him for anything, he understands exactly what I'm asking of him. He just can't verbalize it. I feel like not that ELL students are toddlers, but that's where they are learning. It's the same level of learning that language, because it's learning it from scratch versus learning it from growing up around it.
Yeah.
This is a good segue to talk about the Van
Meer.
I don't even know how to say the W guy's name.
I don't remember. That article, because I really liked this article because it talked all about how much of an impact language is in the classroom. And for me, what I really appreciated was that it made note to the fact that language is its own separate standard in the Common Core, when it really should just be integrated at every level of school.
Of every subject.
You can't spend 20 minutes to teach language and then ignore grammar, punctuation, and language itself in all other subjects. Doesn't work that way.
Which what Kim Markworth always talks about that, because we have to do our write-ups within the math, and she's always like, make sure it's grammatically correct. I know I'm a math teacher, but I will notice these things. And it's so true. When you go on in your schooling, it doesn't matter what subject you're in. If you write a poorly grammatically written paper, you're gonna get marked down on it.
Someone's gonna bite you in the butt.
Yeah, exactly.
Should I hire you?
It talked, the section that I read about was about language as action, and so it talked a lot about teaching ELLs and students in general about how to use language to describe what they're doing, what they're thinking, and using it as a force and a power within a classroom in order to help them, debate and collaborate and discuss and describe and do all of these different things. That, we just say, explain your thinking, but really teaching them to use their language as a powerful tool, rather than just, words that will happen to be on paper.
I actually spoke about that within my write-up, within this section, actually, and how, I go to my go-to teaching through music, because that's what I know well, and that's what I plan on doing. But for an ELL student, finding something like a lullaby or a kids song or a folk song that they know in their language, and then translating that into English, or vice versa, doing a simple one like the Itsy Bitsy Spider or Baa Baa Black Sheep, where it's a simple one, it has a rhythm that's easy to follow, and then do it in their language. So translate it into their language, and then do it in their language and do it in English, and then while you're doing it in their language, hold up if it's Baa Baa Black Sheep, hold up a picture of a black sheep, or when you're singing it in English, hold that up so that they get that correlation between the two and the visual. So you're doing a little bit of everything, because music is the only is the only thing that utilizes both spheres of your brain at the same time. So if you're powering both sides of their brain and then doing the visual cues at the same time, and they're more likely to make that connection and to have that as a lasting, not necessarily memory, but a lasting, I guess, memory works for that.
I was going to say memory, because in SPED we kind of do the same thing where you have to do a TPR, total physical response, which I always go back to this one, but the one in 3rd grade, the perimeter is the distance around a shape, and so every time the kids would get up or have to do it or something, the teacher would be like, what's the perimeter? And they'd all have to do it, so it kind of sticks in their head.
Yeah,
perimeter it just around shape.
That reminds me
area.
That reminds me of multiple intelligences, because I was actually studying for a PE exam, and there were 4 ways that physical education like helps your body, and it's like better mental health, and then like weight controllers or something like that. And then multiple intelligences, there's like kinesthetic, and there's spatial, and just incorporating as much as you can in a lesson helps students remember and retain it so much longer.
Well, and doing, like, depending on the grade level you're at, you can give them one of those tests at the beginning of the school that's like, this isn't going to be graded, it's just a pre-assessment to figure out what kind of learner you are so that I can better teach you. And so you can figure out which ones are your kinesthetic, which ones are your visual, which ones are your audio learners, so that you can maybe group them together or group them in, so there's one from each kind at a pod, if you do pods in your classroom or something like that. It makes it so much easier on everybody, not just on the teacher, but also on the students, because then they're more likely to be able to learn because you are better teaching to them.
Yeah. So I definitely feel like we're grasping at language is a huge part of education. There's so many different forms of, I guess, language that help students learn and, I guess, understand things better. And I guess, wow, I keep doing that. I like in mid-thought, and then it's like,
it's gone.
It's gone.
Welcome to my life.
But pretty much, I feel like language is such a big aspect of communication and understanding, and really, I guess, touching on all the different points of language and all these different subjects is really what is key to having students learn effectively.
Absolutely.
Well, it's like, language is such a powerful tool. Like, during our practicum, my learning partner, he and I would work a lot, I guess, during writing, which obviously you're using language when you're writing, but we were working on persuasive pieces and like debating, and then you would get in groups and you would talk about what you were talking about, and like try to persuade them, like, to do, whatever you wanted them to do. In this case, they were saying which person in the building was best. So they were like, is Mr. Joe, the janitor, the best? Is Mr. Page, the principal, the best? Etc. And he always struggled with writing his words down on paper. And so when I would come up to him, he would be like, I just don't know. I don't know what to say. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, I don't understand what I'm doing. He's like, I don't know where to start. So instead of having him write down, his 5 brainstorming points, which is what we were doing that day, I would sit with him and just say, okay, describe to me why, say, Mr. Joe is the best person in the school. And he would
Mr. Joe is pretty cool. He's pretty great.
And he would be able to sit there and describe to me in, for like 10 minutes about all these different things that were going through his head and what he thought. And, you have to remind him, like, you just finished the assignment to me. You just told me all about it. And it kind of clicked. He was like, oh, I didn't realize my thoughts were okay. I thought I had to come up with something better.
No.
And it was like, the things that are going around in their brain and what they're using as their language and what they're thinking, you have to remind them that it's important. And just because maybe it's not formulated in strict ways, even though it's more fluid and more organic, that it's still valued and it's so important within a classroom and in every subject.
I definitely think that aspect of language is definitely Okay,
30
screwed. Underrepresented, huh?
We're at 30 seconds left.
Okay, so pretty much I feel like that's underrepresented, and in SPED we learn that 95% of what we teach others, which can be explaining something to someone else,
Teaching someone else
helps you retain it better. Like, you learn from teaching other people, and if we, I mean, I feel like that's what we're doing right now, but pretty much, was it Dylan who was telling you about, you know, his ideas, helping him understand it because he can explain it to you. His brain's processing it.
Timer.
Should we just touch on No Child Left Behind?
Yeah.
Let's just make sure we have all of
I'm
post
gonna
6.
set a timer for like 5 minutes to talk about No Child Left Behind.
Yeah.
Alright.
Perfect.
No
Even
Child
though
Left
we could go
Behind.
for a long
I'm
time.
gonna be honest, I didn't even know like that many details of No Child Left Behind. I just knew it was kind of negative. I just like,
That's
didn't look
okay.
It
into
has
it.
a negative connotation.
It does.
And because the implementation of it has produced a negative
Mm-hmm.
effect versus like if you're just reading about it
Mhm.
and like the in theory
You'd think
it was a
good
great
thing.
idea.
It had good intentions.
Yeah, it had totally good intentions. It just wasn't implemented correctly.
Yeah, it can't be executed. And honestly, I don't think we should have non-teachers trying to implement teaching.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Get in the
Amen.
classroom yourself and then
Facts.
tell
I'm
me.
like,
Yeah.
You can't tell me that I get to get paid based on my students' test scores on an all-English test that's almost entirely multiple choice that these students may not succeed in due to a variety of reasons, not because they don't know the information.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of makes me think about the factor about administration, not the
The
college part, the
legislation.
just the administration, the administration part, and where administrators, like, okay, this happened specifically at my high school, and I was like with my dad. This administrator came down, and he's like, "What if we like planted seeds for students to find in curriculum?" And it sounded weird because if you're planting something for a kid to find,
And
they
just gonna
don't
search
find
and
it. Not like a physical thing, just like an idea.
Oh, okay. I was like,
But like, if you like, I don't feel like that's a student learning because you're asking them to find something. And I was thinking, you're an administrator. You haven't taught for a while. You're not in the classroom right now. You don't know, no offense, what students need. Like,
you're less likely to understand what
Yes.
a child today, right now, needs in a classroom setting
Yeah.
because it's been how many years since you've been in a classroom?
Yeah.
In 30, I forget which class, 310, I don't know, Kate Wade's class,
310.
school board, where all of them have never been educators, and yet they're the ones making all the
All
rules
the
for
decisions.
all the
Decisions.
decisions. And
It's
it's
so
just,
sad.
it just is so ridiculous to me. And yeah, I just completely agree with you, Lauren. Like, if you have no experience other than what you personally went through,
yeah,
And there's nothing for you to base on.
like
Well, they don't understand. They don't understand ELLs. They don't understand special education. They don't understand behavioral issues, autism, etc. All these things that go into every single child. Sorry, I'm talking really fast. Oh my gosh.
Woo!
It's told you, it's a
Got a
passionate subject.
They just don't understand what goes into each and every student and trying to teach them that trying to make a one-size-fits-all test
Is not conducive to that.
does not work.
No, at all. Well, and it's just like going back to the Tucson one where it was that white, rich, older male was the superintendent talking about how this isn't working for these students. This isn't a way to implement this. Where did you ever go into the classroom? Did you ever watch it happen? No, you didn't. You're just using your own prejudice and biases against these students and these people because you don't want to be backing up because maybe somewhere along the line you won't get reelected because of all of the other upper class white people that don't want this to happen.
So I think I completely agree. I think as like a closure, I've always just wondered, like, I know that No Child Left Behind is, has a negative connotation, but what could be an alternative way to assess students' success and just stuff like that? Because other than assessments, like, how can you
have them come into the classroom and see what's working well and what's not working well?
basically, like,
no, but tracking student
success.
success. Other than
So,
tests,
like,
you know?
in SPED, we did the thing on the Peabody website, the Iris Peabody website.
Module.
Yeah, Iris module Peabody website, and it talked about differentiated instruction and assessments, and pretty much it's not really giving them tests, but giving them, so if you did a whole unit on, blankets, you did a whole unit on blankets, you'd give them the option to do, maybe a poster or a presentation or just multiple different aspects with things that relate to that, with specific guidelines, but specific to what they were doing, but they get free choice on their specific assessment and kind of the ideas that go into it. So it's kind of pick something from this unit and represent it this way, or this way, giving them kind of a choice, but that's still curriculum based, but gives them more free choice and their pick.
Yeah, I think a way to wrap that up and just
options.
is a good way would be maybe differentiation. Maybe we just don't know yet, but I think that's something that we need to pursue as
future educators.
Because we know the testing isn't working.
Because we know it's not working, so what is going to work, and that's what
how can
that's
we make
what should
that
be our next
be what
goal.
we're using.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool.
Alright.
That's a
So
good
really
way of wrapping it up.
point, yeah.
Hey, technical assistant over there.
Thanks, Joy. See you
Thanks,
next
Joy.
week.
Bye. Can you turn it off, Nico?
Oh, I can get it.
Well, Riley can. I just didn't want you to be that awkward of here I'm coming towards the camera.
Okay.
Bye, guys.